Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Eric Simonson. Thanks for joining us today for our LinkedIn Live on frictionless customer experiences, the key to unlocking satisfaction. Look forward to a great conversation today. Would first kind of ask you, where's everybody joining from today? We've got three of us here on the video that you'll be talking with. Two of us, Shirley, my colleague, and myself, are in the Dallas Fort Worth area, so nothing too exciting, although a great spring. And then Bill, our guest, has not only bringing us pixie dust of great new content, but also he's decided to join us from Italy as a part of his world tour. So, and also wowing us with an amazing background that is a little bit different than my home office. But so, where are others joining from? Any interesting places, or a lot of other people just joining from the burbs, like Shirley and I are. Our topic today, frictionless customer experience. In some ways, it's a little bit of an old topic or a long-standing topic. If I think back, 20 years ago when I started doing more in this space, some of the first things I was hearing about were consolidated banking statements. How can people see all the information they need at once from the credit card, the savings, et cetera? People were barely doing online banking at the time, and since then we've seen a lot of evolution of digital experience. Mobile came about. We've had design thinking. We use the word CX, and we know what that means. We talk about empathy. There's a whole bunch of kind of steps we've had along the way. So we'll get into today. Kind of why are we having this conversation now, and what do we see as kind of the future of this theme over time. Before we get into that, I want to ask Shirley, who's our partner, leads a lot of our CX research, to introduce herself, and then we'll turn to Bill.
Thanks, Eric. It's so great to be here. I'm looking at where all of you guys are joining us from. It's a truly global audience. We have people all over the world, and it's making me crave actually traveling. Not that that's too much of an ask, actually, especially with Bill being in lovely Italy, making me jealous. I've been with Everest Group now for about almost 5 years. I lead our research and customer experience management services, as well as some of the other kind of horizontal back office functional areas of finance and accounting, procurement, supply chain management services. My background is actually in a variety of different consulting, strategy consulting, process improvement consulting, benchmarking, HR consulting, rewards consulting. And I also worked for a mining company for about 10 years in a variety of different global roles. So a little bit of a Jill of all trades, and really looking forward to having a spirited conversation here today about what it means to be frictionless in CX.
Excellent. So just we threw out the question, where are people joining us from, and I think we do have a lot of locations. Somebody has suggested they're coming in from Kathmandu, which I hope that's true. I've been there myself, and that's an interesting place. And with that, I think I've seen South America, Mexico, Europe, Asia, North America, Canada represented. So a good mix of people from around the world. Bill, I've already spilled your beans about your exotic globe trotting. Why don't you introduce yourself and put a little more color around your background and where you're coming from for this discussion.
No, very happy. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Shirley, too, for the invitation to join you. This is actually my wife's and my first trip to Europe, or really outside of North America, since COVID. And I was thinking about it. I was actually supposed to be with a client in Milan on March 10th, 2020. And was called down from that, actually called back to the States because of the beginning of the raging pandemic, which of course hit Italy really, really hard. So I just made the connection. We're back here as our first country. We're having a really good time. We spent a few days in Oxford, England, where we were celebrating the birthday of my co-author, David Jaffe. Some of you on the bridge probably know David pretty well. So anyway, And I'm happy to join you here today. So I got into CX many years ago, more than 30 years ago, as a chief financial officer and then COO for a startup company. We were doing IVR service bureau work for companies that wanted to remove some of the routine contacts from their agents and use an IVR. So this is before the web was even invented. And we scored successes with companies such as United Airlines and Visa that wanted to remove some of these merely unwanted contacts, useful contacts, but it was an early form of doing automation or self-service. That company got bought by MCI in the early 1990s, 1991. I see some of my former MCI colleagues registering already, which is fun to see. And then built out a business unit called MCI Call Center Services. We had a BPO unit, an automation unit in the MCI network, almost in the cloud, you could say today. And then we had a consulting team too. And I had a bunch of ideas about forming my own company, but I let it be known that I would be interested in running customer service for another company. So I found myself interviewing with Jeff Bezos, and he hired me to be Amazon's first worldwide VP of customer service about 24 years ago. So I did that for about 3 years. Still had the hankering to build my own business, so I left. That didn't quite work out timing-wise. So I've been doing consulting with my own firm, Driva Solutions, which has a lot of terrific experts on the team. And then my international partnership we call LimeBridge, including my business partner, David, with whom we've now written 3 books. So CX has been in my DNA, you could say, for a very long time, before, during, and now after the internet and with the explosion of everything else that we'll talk about during the call today.
Excellent. So I'll come to you in a second, Bill, to set up some of the point. Before I do that, just for everyone joining us, please enter any questions or comments that you have. I'll try to be monitoring those and feeding them into the discussion as much as possible. So feel free to use the comments, and you may even have some debates back and forth with each other as well. So with that, Bill, you've recently written and published a new book, and would love for you to kind of take us through kind of why a new book now, and what are some of the key things that you're trying to get across.
Well, as I mentioned, David and I have written 3 books. The first one came out in 2008. The title was a little bit of a pretzel logic to a lot of people, but it made sense to us and to Amazon as well. It was called The Best Service is No Service. So again, 2008. And many of the things we talked about in that book, we are now updating and completely reframing with new channels that customers have, with higher levels or greater amounts of customer expectation for support, which we'll probably get into later on as well. And with the proliferation of new systems like automated alerts and SMS and ChatGPT, all sorts of things that are exploding around. We brought the book to our publisher with the idea that we wanted to shake people up and say, despite investments in IT systems, in customer experience programs and the like, the sad fact is that customer satisfaction is down. Looking at various indices outside of the United States, things like Trustpilot in the UK, the American Customer Satisfaction Index in the United States, and similar surveys in Australia, where David lives, and other countries. And part of that I mentioned a few minutes ago, which is customer expectations are higher. They want things faster. They want things to work right. They want things that actually serve them well. In other words, things that are personalized, or things that need to be that are aimed to be very specific for their requirements, rather than something generic or broad. And because of that, customers tend to say, well, when we survey our customers, we're not seeing much improvement. Well, that's because overall customers aren't happy, and they're telling you by criticizing, by sending critiques or comments to the company, by changing companies, by actually leaving your business because they're not happy with what they're doing. That's sort of the ultimate turnoff, if you will. So deliver great customer experiences with less effort is the subtitle we came up with our publisher. And we basically have these 9 chapters that you see. Each one starts with or is led by an active verb. And we start with figuring out why customers are contacting you. 5 strategic actions in the middle, including the one right in the center, the bullseye, called preempt. We really focus on eliminating the need for contacts prior to digitizing them, prior to figuring out whether you should digitize or have self-service. And then we finish with the final section on the right, which is to maintain and improve this over time, and an ongoing learning cycle, and then the willingness and the penchant to redesign what you're doing, basically reinvent what you're doing pretty constantly, pretty steadily, before some other organization or company is going to do it to you, and you're going to lose even more business because of their creativity and their actions. Each of the chapters has a bunch of stories, both bad stories, what we call them, and good stories, and then a framework to figure out, so you can figure out whether you're really making some progress in these 9 different actions.
Shirley, any reactions to those 9?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I think one of the things we were just talking about when a little bit earlier this morning was that whole concept that customers don't really want to contact you, right? And that somehow or another you made them do it because something failed. And that really kind of resonates with me. People, well, I mean, some people might call just to chat because they might be a little lonely, but those are special kind of circumstances. But mostly people don't really want to reach out, right? And so and we hear that quite a bit actually from organizations. They say, we would love to improve our customer experience, but actually where the points of failure come from, it's outside of my immediate area of responsibility. Right. I don't have ownership over that, you know. So how do I actually influence that? Maybe it's a product issue, you know, product design issue. Maybe it's something else that maybe it's an IT legacy system issue that it happens kind of further upstream. And so how does that factor into how can I influence customer experience if it's outside of my control, right?
It's such a core issue, isn't it? It's a customer. I mean, I've run customer service operations for many years, so I can be really sympathetic or empathetic to it. And many of the team members I have in Driva Solutions have done the same. So we've all come from being on that firing line, and it's a tough job because budgets are always scarce. Pressure is really high to try to satisfy the customer, resolve the issues clearly, but to satisfy the customer. When in fact, in the research we show in the book and the stories in the book, relatively few issues are caused by customer service or customer support or tech support, customer care, whatever you call it. We can talk about first contact resolution being the requirement or the challenge for customer service teams, but even some of that is really caused by other groups. But in general, as you're mentioning, Shirley, the issues that prompted or forced a customer to contact you for help are outside of their control. So in the book, we emphasize something we call the whole of business challenge. Everybody in the organization needs to raise his or her hand and say they're responsible for customer service or their portion of customer service. And the way we do that is to break down those reasons, break down those issues into finite parts that are in the customer's language. And the customers might say, my bill's too high, or they might say, my internet is dropping again, or they might say, I can't find the operating instructions, or they might say, hey, I want to buy more from you, or they might say, I want to buy less from you. And those are usually what the customer is saying in the first 30 seconds of a phone call, the subject line of an email message, the opening of a text, like, how can I help you in a chat field? They really come out with it right away. And then each of those issues needs to be assigned to an owner. And in very few cases is that owner customer service. It's typically, as you mentioned, someone in IT or product design or marketing. So the one that I gave you as an example, I'll go back to that, which is, why is my bill so high? Or I disagree with this charge, or there's an error on my bill. Those types of issues about invoicing. It could be that there's an error in the calculation method, which could be traced back to someone in IT, or it could be that some special, some deal or discount was not carried over, or was removed too early, in which case it could also be IT, or it could be someone from product design. So there are various possible or potential owners for something like, why is my bill so high? But once you start digging into those root causes, then customer service presents the information, the frequency of contacts, maybe associated with CSAT scores or some other type of CX metric. And then the owners go, most of them say, we didn't realize that what we were doing is causing that type of an issue. We don't want that to happen, because listen to these calls, or looking at these chat sessions, looking at the NPS scores, looking at customer churn data by issue, often reveal basically the engagement occurs at that point, because then these owners say, okay, I think we know what we do. We need to change this, add this, modify that, test that. And that's outside of customer service. The customer service, meanwhile, still answering a lot of calls and trying to resolve calls, but they have now partnered with these different functions in the organization to really do the right thing and to come up with the right issues and solutions.
So one of the things that you've been saying, and it sounds like you're describing a culture, a pervasive culture of customer centricity, right? That needs to be infused into all parts of the organization. Have you seen examples of where that is done particularly well? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I know that in some organizations they are starting to appoint like chief customer officers or something like that, that is really looking at the customer experience from that standpoint. Does that help? Or, like what are some of the other kind of strategies or techniques that you've seen that helps reinforce that customer centricity?
Well, my good friend Jean Bliss has written a couple of books on chief customer officer. I think she was one of the first ones to popularize the CCO concept, and continues to work in that area very successfully. A CCO can be quite successful, but even most CCOs don't have the full remit. They might be the centralizing place where a lot of the voice of customer inputs, the transactional data, the customer service data, they may go into a CCO's, say, office or organization. But the CCO typically isn't going to be the owner of the issues. It's again, IT, product design, marketing, web development, shipping teams, and so forth, depending on what the issue is. So the CCO might have a little more senior status in the organization than a VP or head of customer service. But that's only like and not to minimize, it's like a stepping stone. It's centralizing place for the information to get to to get over to the owners. Where we've seen this work well, we've got a story in the book. Maybe we can start sharing some of the stories in the book. But one of it is about Blizzard Entertainment. They're a part of a very big gaming company, and Microsoft is in the final throes of buying that company. But it's been a multiplayer game company for many years, and they had a workshop where they brought together all these potential owners from like product design and marketing and IT and so forth. And there was a real reluctance to carve out time from one schedule building stuff to actually sit down and talk about customer complaints or customer issues. But shortly into the workshop, the head seeking ownership for different issues, one of the senior executives raised his hand and said, well, I guess that's my team's fault. I guess we did that one. And that kind of broke the dam, because after that, other owners started to pony up and say, maybe that's something we can look at. And the IT guy who first volunteered had said, well, I guess I own that one too. I own that one too. And we talk about that in the book. And Todd Pawlowski, who was running customer service at Blizzard at that time, tells us that they had a significant reduction in the rate of contacts, which is really the key metric that we talk about in the book, meaning the number of and the cost of contacts per customer, per gamer in their case, per order shipped, per invoice rendered. So the rate of contacts is what you want to come down. So if you're doubling your revenue, you want to have almost maybe a flat, meaning no increase in the rate of contacts. You don't want to double your number of contacts or even go higher than that. You really want to bring that number down. And so by measuring the rate of contacts in total, and then break it down into the rate of contacts by issue, like, why is my bill so high? That's not a Blizzard question necessarily, although it could be. And so Blizzard just opened up, because a lot, again, the owners weren't aware of what their teams are really causing within the organization, and that really helped them a lot.
All right, so Bill, one of the first questions we had, this was Charles, I think, was kind of getting at the point you were just, there we go. Just basically these preempt, how much of it is just forcing the customer to use a different channel versus there's actually something changing under the hood that's, making it better, removing the need. And I think that the Blizzard example you gave is, organizations trying to take it seriously and trying to
Right.
make the true demand
Right.
for contacts go down.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I guess just, answering the question just in general,
Right.
how common is it that people are actually working on the second part of this versus just trying to
Right.
deflect things to other channels?
Well, the preempt is a really good Band-Aid, and I say that in all positive ways to Charles and to others on the call who are answering this one. In that when a company knows something isn't going right or something is going to go wrong, it's so important to tell the customer before the customer figures it out himself or herself. And a simple example is if Amazon, if you buy something on Amazon, Amazon will tell you the shipping window is going to be, Thursday to Friday, such and such time, or they may even specify, say it's going to be Thursday between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. or something like that. And when I was at Amazon, I was really impressed that Amazon took that as a promise. That term promise was really important within the company. So if Amazon thought that it was going to miss that promise, i.e. break that promise, then there'd always be an alert. Hey, we're going to let you know that we're having trouble because of weather, because of shipping status, because of whatever. And it's not going to get there Thursday. It's going to get there Friday or Tuesday or whatever it might be. So the customer can either cancel the order and buy it somewhere else or make other plans. And those examples we talk about in the preempt chapter as really essential to getting the word out to the customer so the customer can really be more in control and figure out what to do. But that's necessary but not sufficient. The sufficiency, I think, is what's coming into this question is how can you push that further and make sure you figure out, well, why did we have to send that preempt out, that alert out? What was it that was it weather? Maybe we can't overcome weather. Maybe we should have built in a little more buffer because of weather possibilities. Or if it was our own fault because the shipper messed up, then we ought to do something to deal with that shipper. So we're not talking about FAQs per se. We're really talking about alerts and updates to customers. Airlines do this really well now. If their flight's going to be delayed or canceled, they'll let you know that, hopefully before you leave your home or office to go to the airport, so you can make some other arrangements. They may even say, your flight number 233 has been delayed, but don't worry, we've rebooked you on flight 400, and you're going to get there only an hour and a half later. Well, then you don't have to worry about that. And now they're looking out for you. So that's really what we want under preempt, is the idea of we're looking out for you when there is some sort of inflection point or some sort of a disruption that otherwise is going to be really frustrating for you if you find out about it later on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the examples you've given were things I was thinking about as I was reflecting before the call, which was when I think about what was my customer experience I expected 25, 30 years ago, sort of you'd call the 800 number or write a letter if you had to, but it was kind of, if I had a thing, the experience wasn't a big part of the thing. And, and now it's become so embedded that the service sometimes is very much a part of the thing. So we'll take the video game. It used to be, you had cartridges, you had consoles, you had joysticks, you plugged it into the TV, and if something was broken, okay, great. But you didn't have ongoing billing. You didn't have, chats and communications. There wasn't everything there is now, where almost like using the service itself requires service. And the airline is another good example of the rebookings, the delays, the gate changes, the payment. It's just, there's so many things where the customer experience is becoming part of the service itself. Do you see that as well, or am I?
No. Absolutely right. It has changed dramatically in the last 25 years, and even in the last 10 or 12 years with the explosion of social media and all these additional channels that are out there. And companies have done a wonderful job getting new and innovative products out there for their customers, or services for their customers to enjoy. But some of those products and services are pretty complicated. You have telcos, for example, that might have 30 different dialing plans or 30 different internet plans based on family and usage and so forth. And it gets very confusing for customers and for customer service reps to figure out, well, what plan should you be on? Or are you on the right plan? Or are we billing you correctly for that plan? And so in the drive to have products be a little more personalized or a little more available for customers, it's getting more complicated, not easier. And the customer service rep, I mean, they're like, overwhelmed sometimes in terms of handling the issues that come in. When if a head of product design can listen to those calls about confusion regarding plans, maybe he or she will go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should reduce the number of plans we have, simplify it, only have 3 plans or 5 plans. Why do we need 30 plans? And so I think that it was probably easier 25 years ago, Eric, because there really were only a couple of plans. And now there's much more of a proliferation of those types of options. I'll go away from telco and just talk more generically. So we've made it more complicated for our customers to figure out what makes sense. We've made it more complicated for our agents to do the right thing. So an example we do talk about in the book, completely different industry than telco, is Nike. So Nike came up with an idea that we found to be just really terrific, and we talk about it in the book. And I've heard since then that they've taken it even further, which is exciting. But Nike's most active runners would call up the contact center and say, "Hey, I'm going to be running my first marathon at altitude, and will my Nike, Pegasus 43 shoes, be sufficient?" Well, a lot of the customer service reps are runners, but not all of them. They're called athletes. Some of them are true athletes, and other ones would have to then consult to a knowledge base or some sort of a user's guide to figure out, okay, multiple marathoner, now doing at altitude, Pegasus, all these different things, which ironically a ChatGPT might actually figure out because it can deal with connected questions like that. But nonetheless, it's a hard issue. So what Nike figured out was, let's just route these active runners to our headquarters staff and have them talk to our shoe engineers. So now we have an active runner talking to an active runner who's actually designing the shoes. And it became a wonderful set of conversations and learning experiences in both directions that has now evolved into a whole program that Nike has, where you can sign up and really speak to a whole number of different experts at Nike based on what you want in terms of training or in terms of equipment or shoes or so forth. And so it opened up a channel that they hadn't thought about. And now the owners, if you will, back to your point, Shirley, before, the owners as well as the influencers are in the headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, not necessarily in the contact centers handling the issues. So you can deal with that problem different ways. But what Nike did was say, let's just route these contacts and these customer types over to our headquarter folks. So that was, I think, an effort, Eric, to get it back to the simpler days where you don't have to think about all those options.
Yeah, you're touching on a thing that I'm going to try to hold for a little bit later in the conversation, which is, if you can get the problems fixed, did these things also become opportunities to debate and do things? I think that we kind of have started on the fix the problem, and there's good reasons for that. But maybe come back to how if you can create opportunity and do it.
I did want to just kind of offer an alternative as well to that situation, Bill, that you just described. We're hearing a lot about how, for example, the gig workforce could be leveraged within a customer experience type of situation. And one of the best use cases that we see for that is that concept of a super fan or a brand ambassador or somebody that knows your products or your services better than perhaps it yourself, right?
Right.
And so they become the extension of your customer service. We hear about, like, for example, Airbnb, the super hosts, right? They can give advice to other hosts when it comes to their listing and how they manage their properties for rental and things of that nature. So that extension of that concept into a more of a crowdsourced gig type of model is something that we see quite a bit too, right?
I think that is underplayed, frankly. I'm glad you really mentioned that. And we don't have too many examples. I don't think we have any examples in this book. We talk about it a little bit in our second book. But I was talking just the other day to Gary Qualls, who was a client in the past at DirecTV, and now he's on my Driva Solutions team, my team Driva. And we were both reminiscing about a former colleague of his named Charles Miller, who was really responsible for the crowdsourcing, the C2C, customers to customers at DirecTV. And I remember Charles telling us a story some years ago that at DirecTV, there was this one guy who kept commenting on remote controls, handheld remote controls. And there are many remote controls that these companies come up with based on different generations of their products and TVs and set-top boxes and the like. And this one guy seemed to be really, really knowledgeable about them. And if I remember correctly, some of the engineers at DirecTV took a little bit of offense because this guy seemed to be, being very, I don't know, not cocky, but very sure of himself. Well, Charles and others reached out to him, found out this guy was volunteering his time, taking apart remote controls, figuring out how the little devices work, making recommendations to make them simpler, to have the buttons bigger or this or that or the other thing, to a point where DirecTV started sending out prototype hand devices to him, remote control devices, to get his criticism, to get his inputs. And then he would be knowledgeable even earlier on in the process, in the design process, and he would help improve the design process. He wasn't asking for anything. He just loved doing this. And so these super fans can be hugely influential, to use that term, but also a very good source of information back to the company to help them out to figure out how to redesign or simplify or come up with a different approach.
So looking across a couple of the comments here, there are a number of people that are basically, hey, the customer service is challenging because the product that related to it has its own problems and struggling to get the organization to wrestle with the foundational issue.
Yes. Right.
You've mentioned, I think, trying to start making sure you're tracking what are the things the customer describes as the issue, that you get that sense. Any other thoughts on like what are the first couple things that a company needs to do to get going on solving it, and kind of how much of that is like process and data versus how much of it is culture and just raw leadership?
It's actually an interesting combination of all of them, but let me start with the process and data first, because that's usually where companies get stuck. If we ask the question, and if those of you on the call would ask yourselves about your companies, how many different reason codes, how many different issues or intents do we capture and track and report? A reason being something like, why is my bill so high? Or I can't find your retail store location online, whatever those short little blurbs are. We find that companies either have 6 or 8 of them, like billing issues as a generic title, or they have hundreds, if not thousands of them that break down into all sorts of different levels and sub-steps or sub-elements. And neither range is really useful or active at all or actionable at all. So we look at, and in the book we emphasize and encourage 25 to 50 reasons maximum. And that could be for tech support, 25 to 50, maybe 25 to 50 for care or for account maintenance, but no more than that. None of them would be other or general. They would all be mutually exclusive and collectively exhausted, meaning that you've covered 100% of those. Once you do that, which takes some time to do, then you break down each of those into their frequency, meaning the volumes, the costs. The costs are not just the operating costs, meaning the handling costs, but we emphasize something important called downstream costs, like what happens after the contact is over to resolve the issue. Additional research, sending out a technician to the home to fix the problem, refunding money, going out to reclaim a product and send back a replacement. These are all really expensive downstream post-contact, meaning post-customer service costs that some other department bears. So reduce the number of reasons down to 25 to 50, have the frequency, have the operating costs and the downstream costs. And then the fun begins, because now you're talking, then you talk about customer experience. Then start measuring and reporting customer experience at the reason level. And so you look at first contact resolution, customer satisfaction, customer effort score, first maybe net promoter score. And then one of the really most salient ones, Eric, is looking at churn or turnover by reason. And with the compilation of those, which is a lot of data crunching, but essential, we think, is foundational. Then you start taking it to your finance folks, your IT folks, and you start really figuring out what the real nature is of customer experience. Some customers are perfectly happy contacting you on some of these issues. they have low churn afterwards. There's high FCR. They give you a very high number for Net Promoter Score. The costs are relatively low. But on the other hand, there are reasons such as my internet keeps dropping, or my bill is wrong, or you messed up again, or you didn't get back to me about this issue that you promised me about. These are what we call the irritating issues. And the irritating issues could have very high customer churn. They could have very low Net Promoter Scores and have very low first contact resolution. And so the customer experience was already bad before they contacted you. And then it continues to be bad even when they contact you. And these are difficult contacts, as those of us know who have run tech support or customer care, or those of us as consumers who have had to do it ourselves when we've had to make those contacts. And so when you break it down that level, then the ahas occur. And the different potential owners start saying, I guess that's mine. I guess we better look at that together. Let's figure out how to break it down into some root causes and then figure out what we should do about this particular issue. Above and beyond preempt, get down to why is it that internet keeps dropping? And it could be that that customer isn't really in the right location for your services. And maybe we should tell them, you might be better off with one of our competitors. Or maybe you can get some sort of enhanced device that makes it easier for your connection. But it could be that there's not even the right match between customer and product or customer and service. You don't really know that until you break it down to that level of detail.
We had a question from Bogdan, which ties a little bit to some of what you're saying. I think the total cost, which it was, do you differentiate the rate of contacts per channel as channels have different costs? I think this question was put in a couple minutes ago, but you were touching on some of this. Kind of how would you think about the level of granularity on costs?
Start first with the assisted contacts, because they're definitely the most expensive ones. So the assisted contacts would obviously be phone calls, emails, if you're still using email, live chat, and get those, add those up first. And then start looking at the assisted channels, such as chatbots or apps or an IVR page, if you're still using IVR like my company ACP used to do years ago, or website interactions, meaning pure interactions with the web. But the most expensive and probably the most painful issues are really in the assisted support. So having said that, where do our customers go first? You guys have done research on this. We've had some good discussions on this in the past, Shirley. Customers are going to go on your FAQs first. They're going to go and maybe check out some sort of a chatbot function. And if that doesn't work, then they're going to wind up contacting your customer service team. So what I would say is combine those. Look at that as a journey or a thread. Don't look at those like most companies do as, well, we had this many contacts in our app and this many contacts in the chatbot and this many contacts in our contact center. Figure out which of your customers went from one channel to another one before they finally got something resolved, because from the customer's point of view, that's a really bad customer experience. So move it upstream as much as possible and have very high containment rates. So my second sort of challenging question to the one that you were answering here is, what is the containment rate? What is the success or containment rate or the FCR equivalent in those upstream channels, such as a chatbot? And we have some good stories in the book from United Airlines, for example, where they have tracked high success rate in their chatbot. But most chatbots, unfortunately, have maybe a 20 to 30 to 40% success rate, which is better than zero. I mean, you're capturing 20 to 30 to 40% of the answers, but think about it this way. It really means 60 to 70 to 80% failure. The customer did not get what she wanted, did not get what he needed. And where did they go next? Maybe they wind up contacting you in a support center. And so an unsuspecting agent is sitting there going, hi, this is Eric. How can I help you? Not necessarily realizing that the customer was already in a chatbot, went through whatever interactions, it didn't work, and now they have to repeat it again. So what we're looking for is that thread from where did the customer start? Each individual customer. And now there's some really good AI tools that can start pulling together and making this channel journey work. It was very hard to do this 20 years ago, Eric, when we started doing some of this together 25 years ago, or now it's much easier, but it's so important. So the agent can say, oh, Shirley, I'm sorry that you couldn't get what you wanted out of the chatbot, but it looks like you're looking for such and such. Here, I think I've been looking this up in the meantime. Here's how I can help you.
Yeah,
So,
and I think I do see a lot of organizations do work around that customer journey mapping to try to
mhm,
understand that holistic kind of journey for the customer across the different
mhm,
channels of contact. I think one of the things this brings up a pet peeve of mine a little bit, which is in the industry, a lot of people talk about deflection,
oh yeah,
deflection rates, and how that is viewed as a bit of a
mhm,
positive thing. I
mhm,
think even the term itself, that's where the pet peeve comes from, because when
yeah,
you're deflecting, it means that you're trying to redirect somebody to a different place
mhm,
than where they really kind of wanted to be at the beginning,
right,
regardless of
right,
whether you think they
right,
should be there. They contacted you there because that's where
yes,
they wanted to be. So,
right,
so
right.
I think even the term itself is very non-customer centric, isn't it? I mean, you're deflecting somebody away
I
into a
mean,
different place.
this is the challenge, isn't it? I mean, we have, as an industry, created so many channels, seemingly to make it easier for customers. We have, as I ticked off earlier with in answer to that previous question, we have apps, we have chatbots, we've got portals. Sometimes we've got IVR menus and trees. We have certainly customer service teams out there, many of those. We have FAQs. I mean, all this stuff is going on, and yet we need to know where our customers are going, and we need to meet them there. It's a pretty simple idea, rather than saying, oh, Shirley, you need to go over here. So here's an example. Customer walks into a retail store, any type of retail store. Let's say it's a bank, it could be a telco, it could be a retail store that's selling clothing. And they come in there and say, I need help with my bill, with my invoice with your company. If the retail rep goes, oh, okay, you need to contact our contact center and they'll help you out. I mean, really a bad experience. If they say second option, we have a kiosk over here where you can call up our center. It'll be a pretty quick time. You don't have to wait on hold very long, and the contact center will help you. And I'm going to go over and sell something else. The third one would be, how can I help you? Let me figure out what I can do. You made the effort to walk into our store to ask a question, which wasn't necessarily what I was meant to do. I'm trying to sell something, but you came in asking for support. So I'm going to give you that support. I'm going to focus on you because you're the most important thing around here. Not a tough issue in the grand scheme of it, but what we've done is we've separated functions so minutely in companies. Well, I'm sorry, I'm a salesperson, and we don't have a service person here. So you customer X, you have to go over and do the extra work, adding friction to figure out what's going on. And so in the cases 1 and 2 that I just ticked off, one being, sorry, customer, you go figure it out, or number 2, go over to that kiosk. Does the company even ask itself, how often does that happen in our retail stores? And how frustrating or how satisfying it might be for our customers to get that answer, rather than saying, well, we sold X amount this month, we had this much footfall, we sold this much per month, and here's what we did. When in fact, a significant percentage of footfall of customers coming to retail stores are really to deal with service issues, not dealing with buying something new. So I think your pet peeve is a real good one. Meet the customers where they are, figure out what they need in that channel, measure whether they got what they needed, and then figure out how to get that containment rate as high as possible in that channel of choice.
Um, you were mentioning a number of channels. One that I've seen
Yep.
grow a fair bit, at least for some things, is the use of Twitter, particularly I think like airlines.
Yes.
Is that something you think organizations should be encouraging, see what the customers do and follow them, or does it, remove context or
Mhm.
things that, create friction in the
Right.
experience?
I mean, I've heard stories, and I think everyone on this call has either done it or heard of friends who have been so frustrated that they couldn't get something answered, that they go to Twitter, and then they get an immediate response because there's a team devoted to Twitter issues that either is more highly skilled, maybe they've got greater empowerment or something, and they're able to get the answer back. But the question is, do you want to train your customers to use Twitter? Maybe you do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you have to ask the question, do you really want to train them to use Twitter? Because they have to go in that app and then go through that app to get to you. Or do you want to handle that issue in different channels, not just that one channel that's out there? A related question is what about the WhatsApp channel? And WhatsApp is used very extensively outside of North America. I'm over here in Italy, as we described, and the cheapest and best way for me to keep in touch with my kids or colleagues and clients and friends and so forth is using WhatsApp. Well, WhatsApp is being used extensively outside of North America as a customer service tool. Most US companies don't use it. So we need to be aware again of where our customers want to be and be responsive. But it's sad when I see that, oh, I went to Twitter and got my answer right away. You should get an answer right away everywhere, or you should not have to have that Twitter interaction fundamentally, because something needs to be fixed underneath of it, underneath of the issue, a root cause identified.
Yeah.
And I think with some of these social media channels, there's that added component where they feel like if we broadcast the issue publicly, there's going to be a better resolution to it.
Right.
And that inherently is a negative interaction. You know, like inherently the consumer is like, I can contact you, but I'm not going to get a result for that, you know, a positive result. And instead I think I'm going to get a better result through these kind of public channels. And I think that pre-assumes a certain level of dissatisfaction already with the way that you treat your customers, right?
It most likely is, and I gave you the example that reinforces what we said a few minutes ago, which is the customer on Twitter might say, I couldn't get through to customer service, or I couldn't get the right answer in customer service, and now I'm resorting to Twitter. So this is a second or third or nth contact. So yeah, they're pretty burned, and certainly the company who receives that Twitter interaction wants to deal with it. It wants to resolve it. In some cases, they say, oh, let's take this offline and I'll contact you separately. And some customers go, okay. And others say, no, I'm now here on Twitter. I'm going to stay here on here because I want to let my friends know that I'm not happy with your service or product or your capability. So it's dangerous to, that's why I'm saying, do you really want your customers to go on Twitter? You probably don't, but you need to monitor it and deal with it, because that may be a channel of last resort for some customers.
Yeah, there's probably a danger if you treat it as like your platinum level service line.
Yes.
Without actually being able to it creates some dysfunction over time, both for your own organization, let alone the customer experience and the public perceptions.
And just to gang up on that, let me just go back and kind of play the broken record again, which is, ask yourself why. Why did the customer have to contact us at all? Your earlier point, Shirley, on Twitter, in the chat bot, in our contact center, in the retail store. Ask why. Why did they need to contact us? And I was mentioning to both of you just before the call started that when we've done this analysis and we talk about the companies we do in the book, ranging from pure online companies like Xero in Australia, New Zealand, or United Airlines, which I mentioned, T-Mobile, Uber, many other companies that we quote in the book, they do a good job saying, well, why did that happen in the first place? Because there are some good reasons, but the averages are difficult to talk about sometimes because they cover so much of a range, but the average is only about 25% of the reasons why customers contact you are good ones. 75% are irritating ones that customers don't want to have to contact you. And unfortunately, here's the other math, which is of every customer who does contact you about something, there's so many more who don't even bother, who've turned off, who have decided, it's not even worth it. I know I'm not going to get a response from this organization. I'm just going to try my own to get the answer, or maybe I'm just going to begin to move off somewhere else. And so that ratio is what we're talking about as a potential new book or new research, which is the propensity to complain. What percentage of your customers really complain about the identical issues? And you'll find that it's relatively low, meaning a lot of customers don't bother to complain. And some customers complain more in certain cultures or regions than others, ages, tenure with you, meaning if they've been with you for 5 years, maybe they don't contact you as much as brand new customers who aren't familiar with the processes. So it's important to figure out how to understand those root causes. And you get that by asking the question, why? Why did they contact us? And then who didn't contact us who had the same issue affecting them?
Yeah. I want to build on that for a moment. And I spoke earlier about, we commented about problems, how do you fix the problem? And then is there eventually opportunity that you're closer to things?
Yes.
You see that. It strikes me that the conversation thus far, we've been talking about the cost of the contact and the downstream of the contact. We haven't really, or I haven't heard you directly say it, Bill, the cost of the underlying problem. What is the problem of the droppage or not being able to reschedule people automatically on flights, et cetera? We kind of break it by the individual. And then your point about, the people who don't even bother to call, right? Because there's a cost to that friction. So I want to switch a little bit now into the, when people start to get this right, it starts to become an opportunity. What does that look like? How do they know? And I'll use kind of a jumping off point. There was a comment by Ivan that said, fulfilled promises and deadlines definitely create recurring customers. Great points to touch base with your clients, for foreseeable hiccups that fails the promise. So, Bill, kind of how much do you see people being able to pivot into creating opportunity from these capabilities versus they're better at solving problems?
Well, I think Ivan is probably asking a similar question that I'll pose back again, which is, are the customers who are getting those fulfilled promises, deadlines met, and so forth, are they more loyal? Are they buying more from you? Are they becoming your recurring customers? And is the opposite the case? Are customers that you are failing, are they going away, buying less from you? And the proof is solid that there is a significant difference between fulfilling promises and meeting deadlines and having recurring customers with much greater loyalty. And the opposite side often does not get noticed as much, which is that those customers who don't have the problems may not even contact you about it. They may just go away. Looking at that churn per issue that I mentioned earlier. And so it's essential to look at it from the customer point of view and then figure out whether we really met what we needed, what we said we were going to do, got back to them when we said we were going to do it, replaced it when we said we were going to do it, refunded it when we said we were going to do it. I mean, it keeps going on and on. Or did we miss a step? And customers are increasingly intolerant of missing any steps. Missing one step along the way is sufficient sometimes for customers to say, that's it, I'm not going to deal with you anymore. And they may not even tell you that. They just may go away. They just may say, I'm not even going to bother to tell you. I'm just going to go away. When the soonest that I can, I'm going to find somebody else or some other organization that's going to help me out. So I think Ivan captured it really well with that summary there.
One thing, when I was reading your book, and I was highlighting, I almost highlighted a section on each page, and then I realized that was a little bit counter useful. But one of the things that I was highlighting was the data point that you were talking about around how companies that have successfully created frictionless types of environments, they spend less on sales and marketing, right? Like things that are because the cost of customer acquisition goes down considerably, and you don't necessarily think about that kind of bigger impact, a much bigger impact, right?
Right. No, it's so important to think through that, which is the customers will stay with you. They will say good things about you to their friends. In other words, the literal NPS type question, I'm saying good things about you guys. And that will influence others to come on board with less effort. New customers will come on board because of the positive word of mouth or the positive referrals through having good service and support. And that has a tremendous effect on marketing budgets. The other effect on marketing budgets, which we talk about in the book, is if the marketing department or the product team is the owner of a problem that is causing the customer issues, then think about reversing the customer service costs to the marketing or product department. So they bear that cost that otherwise would be borne by the customer service VP. I mean, it's an internal cost transfer. We're not talking about changing everything here. Then the marketing sales department go, wait a minute, now you want me to still go out there and acquire more customers when I also have to bear this cost of the problems that we caused? Yes, we do. That's exactly what we want to do, because we don't want to have this. My colleague Peter Massey in the UK calls it the leaky bucket. And if you're losing 20% of your customers because of mistakes and mispromises that are related to what you're doing, but you're still trying to bring more customers in, then you're still going to have the leaky bucket. You're still going to lose 20% of them, and or maybe that increases over time. So I think you put your finger on you got to it reduces, it makes it less expensive to acquire new customers, partly because you have fewer customers that you have to acquire. Customers will stay with you longer. They'll buy from you more. They'll say great things about you. That's what you want. You want them to be the raving fans, as Ken Blanchard said years ago, and say good things about you. Nothing better than that.
Great. I've been scrolling through the questions, and there's quite a few we haven't necessarily directly gotten to, and some just kind of comment, people agreeing with some points on social media. Also, an interesting example of Amazon as a platform, products that are returned frequently, noting those so that they're third parties that can provide extra information back to the community, so that people that are in some way in the Amazon brand but dealing with another company have a good experience in the Amazon platform. So a lot of nice examples. I think I'd like to move towards kind of wrapping up. Bill, before we do that, you've mentioned the book a couple times. Is it fair to assume that people can find the book in all the obvious places, including Amazon?
They can find it on Amazon.com, which is the North American site, of course, but also all the other Amazon sites are carrying it. Amazon.in for India and FR for France and so forth. Other websites as well. And my co-author David and I have a small website that we call frictionlessorg.com. And there's some information on that where we've got a number of postings on that. And any day now, in fact, I wanted it to be out before today. Any day now, my company's new website will be out. www.drivasolutions.com. But it's not out yet. We're having trouble moving from Earthlink to Squarespace because of various issues that those two companies are dealing with. So any day now that will be out. And there's a big section in there, Eric, that talks about the book and where to purchase the book as well.
Shirley, any final comments before we wrap up?
I just wanted to thank Bill for spending the time with us. I had such a good chat. I think in some ways the success of what you did at Amazon, I've heard so many times, people say customer expectations have increased because of what Amazon has trained them to expect. And so it's partly your fault, Bill. But what a real treat and pleasure to hear from you how organizations can keep customers in the forefront of their business. As many of our audience knows, we have a lot of research in the area of customer experience management as well. We're flashing up a on-demand webinar if you're interested in understanding more about how other leading organizations are delivering exceptional customer experience. It's on demand, it's free, so please do feel free to access that and reach out to us anytime. But really looking forward to continuing these conversations into the future. There's lots of work that has been done and lots of work ahead, it sounds like, as well.
Well, thank you for inviting me today to talk about a really serious and core topic of making it better for customers. And I hope that we've shared a few stories to the audience today. And if you have any other questions, it's easy to reach out to me via email, and through Eric and Shirley, we can keep the conversation going.
Great. Thank you, Shirley and Bill, and thank you to everybody listening in or listening to the recording. Hopefully it was a good thought-provoking conversation, and it gives us some energy on how to tackle new things. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thanks.